Hey, everybody. This is Vija Williams with Place, Ben Kinney Companies, Empire Building Podcast, and so many more entities. I need to stop listing all of them.
It is pretty impressive, though. I'm impressed.
No, it's not impressive. I have a lot of great people around me, but thanks everybody for being here. And, it's Wednesday, which means we're doing our weekly webinar. And I keep threatening to do this. Apparently, supposedly we are turning these into a podcast. Someday that will happen. So anyway, I have hopes that someday all of us will slow down for a hot minute and put all this on audio. And I am so excited about my guest today. We had Anna Krueger, who you are seeing in front of you. And if you are driving and listening, don't look.
Yes, don't look. Don't look.
Okay. But Anna's great. Anna and I've known each other for quite a few years. And when I first knew you, Anna, it was as you were an ISA coach, right? Inside sales agent coach for real estate teams. And then you kind of followed your passion and your strengths. See what I did there? And you became a StrengthsFinder kind of certified coach and expert and consultant. And to the point, I mean, you've consulted my entire team at Ben Kinney Companies that I run. You've consulted me personally. You just gave me a little sesh. Heck, 5 minutes ago before we came on live, you just gave me. So I think you are a master and a genius at StrengthsFinders. And because of that, I've started to use it more and more. And actually it's funny because I use it. You will disapprove of one of the ways I use it for.
I already have an idea what that might be based off what we talked about.
Yeah, well, I know. It's kind of a spoiler alert.
It's okay. So. It's okay.
So Anna Krueger, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is a huge honor. And thank you to everyone watching. I know you don't have to watch these and you are. So thanks for hanging out with us today.
Yeah. And so, and I think we should start a little bit with your journey, just kind of briefly what led you to here. And I guess, what makes you an expert in StrengthsFinder?
Yeah. So my journey is, the long story short, is I've been coaching inside sales since 2008. And I really created my own job. I work for myself. I have my own business. And I woke up in 2017 and honestly hated Monday. Like I was like, oh, I'm dreading going to work, even though going to work was in my own house for my own company, doing what I created. And I had this moment of, is this like a contentment problem that is more my attitude and mindset that will just follow me no matter where I go? Or is this feedback from the world that I'm not in the right position? And then how do I know the difference, right? So in business, we can look at conversion metrics, appointments set to held. I can look at a profit and loss, but how do I measure my contentment, So that set me on a journey to seek out a StrengthsFinder coach. And we did 5 sessions. At that point, I didn't really know much about the tool. And within 2 of the 5 sessions, we figured out I just wasn't approaching my role through the lens of strengths. So I actually stayed in real estate. I didn't change my job. I kept doing the same thing, but my happiness, my profitability, and my productivity increased once I started approaching it through my strengths. I also now make 5 times the income I made in 2017. Yay. So
wow, that's incredible.
Actually. I know, it's awesome. And I work less and I'm happier. And that set a fire in me as a coach to think, if this impacted me so greatly, then I want to help the people that I come in contact with everywhere, the coffee shop, at church, in business, in coaching. How can I help everyone unlock what their strengths are? So I went out, activator is one of my top strengths. We share that. So within a month of my experience, I went and became a Gallup certified coach. And I've been coaching ever since. And it's been amazing to see the transformation people have once they embrace their strengths. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Well, yeah. And I think, StrengthsFinders aside for a minute, you are very good at what you do. Because, I think that it's fair to say that, like, you can have strengths on paper and you are who you are. And, maybe not everybody could go even with the same strengths. We all know that they couldn't have the same strengths, but even with similar strengths that they couldn't go do what you do. And I think what's cool about what you do is you work with individuals, but you also work with organizations, because you did a really great workshop for my team. And there was how many, 20
Yeah, there were a
20,
lot of you there.
25.
I couldn't even see everyone on this screen. There were a lot of you there. And I loved your team, by the way. It was great interacting with
They
them.
still talk about it. We'll have you back. And I just want to encourage everybody. It's a really great, it's if you're looking for like an offsite or kind of a team bonding activity. I mean, not to be, I'm just going to be blunt, people talking about themselves, analyzing themselves and working with others around it and where they feel seen and heard. It's so impactful for your team because they don't feel seen and heard all the time, right? And we can't possibly give that to them. And so here we are saying, hey, I'm going to, give you a test or an assessment to take. And you're going to take this assessment and you're going to learn about yourself and you're going to get to share that and learn about your colleagues. Like they're all in.
Oh, yeah. Well, and what's great too, if I can just be candid, a lot of people will say, we're doing this thing, we're getting the team away, we're going to a cabin or whatever it is, and we want to help productivity, we want to help team morale, but we don't really want to do another real estate training. Yeah. And what I love about Strengths is it will absolutely help production, profitability, team synergy, it'll help all those things, but we're not directly talking about real estate. We're talking about how you're wired, and then you can go use it in real estate. And that's when we see performance improve. So it's like a refreshing break that directly impacts business, even though you're not talking about real estate the whole time.
Yeah, for sure. Well said. Well said. So Anna, what is StrengthsFinders?
Yeah, great question. So it's an assessment that you take initially. It takes about 45 minutes max. Some of you will do it in 15 minutes because of your strengths. And at the end, it gives you a report that tells you where you're good. What are your strengths? What are the gifts that you have? And the way I like to describe it is, say that you have somebody built like a linebacker and he says, I want to be a ballerina when I grow up. He could absolutely take classes. He could focus on ballet. He could put a lot of time and energy into that. And he actually could become really good at that. Mm-hmm. Yet if he were to redirect and say, you know what, I see the way that I'm built like a linebacker. When I played football in school, people told me I was really good at it. So he's paying attention to how he's wired physically. He's paying attention to the feedback people tell him that he's really good at. What if he took the same time and energy and focused on being a linebacker in football? He probably would have had a career of success. And so the way that relates to us is maybe the way you grew up or a teacher or a parent you had focused a lot on what you weren't good at. And so whenever I teach this in person, this is where I see people get emotional on their face of how many of you are so aware of what you're not good at and your time and energy has been spent on getting good at the things you're not good at versus what am I excellent at? Like, what do people compliment me on? Where do I get my biggest energy source from? Put your energy towards those things and you will have significantly more success than if you're constantly focusing on the things that aren't your strengths. So that's the idea behind Strengths, is how can we help you know what those things are and then deliberately focus on them.
Who created it? Like, where did it come from?
Yeah, it was a psychologist named Don Clifton. And that was his philosophy of what if we start focusing on what's right with people versus what's wrong with people? What difference would that make? And he's the one who created the tool. And what's great is it's international. It's in, hundreds of countries. And so we have a lot of data that supports what he created.
That's awesome. How easy or hard is it to take the test? Is it something we can find online or,
Yeah, it's really easy. So be careful what you Google because there's a lot of imposter assessments out there. So the website you want to go to is Gallup. It's GALLUP. And then go to products. They'll have a little link that says products and you'll see the assessments there. And you simply buy the assessment and it takes maybe at most, it takes 45 minutes. Most people do it in like 20 to 30 minutes. And anyone, even teenagers, can take it. They have one specifically for people 10 to 14. And then once they're 15 and up, you can take the regular.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, I'm going to have my daughter take that. And I didn't even think about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. And the 10 to 14, their questions are more geared around school because they're not working. And then when the more official StrengthsFinder one, that's more for the 16 or 15 and up, is more geared towards just general life. But I'll show the website real quick so people
Yeah,
know
of
they're in
course.
the right spot. But you go to gallup.com. You should be able to see it right here. When you click on products, you'll see assessments. You just click on that. And you really just need your top 5. When you're just getting into this, if you've never heard of it before, the top 5 is plenty. That will tell you everything you need to know to get started. If you want to unlock all 34, there are 34 strengths total.
Which I highly recommend, but
I do too. I found it helpful to know what I'm not.
Yeah, I kind of did too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it relieved me in what you don't want to do if you do all 34, because I see people do this. They immediately go towards the bottom stuff and then they raise their hand in class. How can I get better at these things? And that's like the opposite of what strengths is designed for. It's more to look at what are my low things. And I really did. I found it almost like a breath of fresh air of like, yeah, I'm not that stuff. Let me just let that go and not worry about it anymore and focus on what I am good at.
I remember on that note, you told me, and I can't remember, it's not a top 5, but you when you describe relator to me, and I think it's one of my top 10, maybe.
It is one of your top 10.
And I remember you describing relator to me, and you gave me a scenario, and I had never, it was like you made me feel okay about myself with that particular scenario. I felt so validated. I was like, yes, I'm exactly like that. You're like, yeah, this is why. This is kind of what this means. This is what people, and no one had ever, you reframed how I do relationships in life, actually, with that. I don't know if I've ever shared that with you. And it was so helpful for me because I just understood immediately. It just became so clear who I was. And it actually, since then, it's affected my job in a really positive way, because I'm like, oh, I'm this way. This is how I do relationships. How can I best sell and recruit and use that for this? And then I started really reframing how I target my day, what my leading indicator activities are. I can't tell you how helpful that was.
That totally fills my bucket, because that's part of why I want to do this is I'm very visual, and sometimes I literally see people sitting in a conference room or walking down the street, like they have a key on top of their head, like up here, and I want to turn it and unlock them to be who they were created to be. And so that totally gives me a lot of joy this morning. So I'm curious if I can ask you a question. I know you're the hostess, but a lot of people listening might not know about strengths, and they might wonder what is relator. So don't worry about the strengths definition. I'm just curious, how would you describe relator to people that are wondering what that is?
Well, for me, what it did is, and it is a good example to use. And I would also say, by the way, the second one that made a really big difference, maybe third, activator and maximizer too. But because I understood what my superpowers were. I was like, oh, so what relator is very deep relationships, maybe not as wide, but very deep. Now for me, which is going to come up different than some of you guys, I speak to a very wide audience, and I enjoy that very much. I very much enjoy having influence and impact in people's lives, just like you do, Anna. But relator is, I just go very deep with the people and very long with my relationships. Now, I may not have thousands, I may have hundreds, but boy, those hundreds, I probably know their soul. And I'm genuinely interested in that. And just, I almost I think you called it input. My curiosity is almost like information gathering, but it's genuine curiosity. And so when you described that to me, I just decided to use that to my best advantage, rather than I need to have more relationships. I'm in sales, I'm in recruiting. I thought, no, I don't.
You don't.
I can be me, and I can go in and do what I do. And this is what my sales cycle is going to look like. This is what my process is going to look like. And that I'm just going to leverage that. It just comes naturally. Why would I fight that? So, I think a lot of people though might have woo, where it's the kind of, I don't know if it's the opposite, but where they're just going to woo everybody they talk to. I don't have that.
Yeah.
And so understanding what I had and didn't have, it was really helpful.
Yeah. And you don't need that. And to everyone listening, imagine if we all were wired exactly the same way. one, we would drive each other bananas, but two, we all fit different roles, different ways. Like Vija, you reach people that I could never reach, and then I can reach people that you don't reach because we're wired differently, and that's a good thing. It's a really good thing. Talking about how you use this in business, I was coaching an agent in Tennessee, actually, Nashville, where you are, and he was struggling to set more than 2 appointments a week as an inside sales agent, which that really you should be setting 5 to 10. That's typical for an inside sales agent. And he was close to not working there anymore. So I said, all right, let's go through your strengths. And his strengths were things like restorative, which means I take something that's broken and fix it. He also had learner, which you have as well. It's that thirst for information. He had input, which loves to gather info and then share it, like give people input.
Yeah.
He had no relationship building strengths in his top 10. He was pretty worried about it. And I'll be honest with you, I was still kind of new to this. And I thought, what are we going to do? He's in sales and he doesn't have these relationship strengths. So I didn't say that. I just said, how can you use restorative input learner in your role as an inside sales agent? So he thought about it and he's like, I talk to these people that are upset with realtors. I could use my restorative to fix the relationship with real estate. Another thing is we know that most objections are a lack of education. So if you educate people properly, a lot of objections go away. So he's like, I could use my learner and my input to learn about the industry to then share that with people that have objections. So his homework, he started watching, he was watching some real estate conference recordings on his lunch breaks, and that gave him energy. So within a couple months, he was now setting 8 a week versus 2 a week. And I asked him, not only are you performing, but I'm curious, do you like what you do? Because you can become good at something, but not like it.
Yeah.
And true strength is I'm good at it and I like it. So I said, you're good at it now, but do you like it? And he was like, I love it. Like, I love what I do. My whole perspective is different. So that's just a really real example of he just took what he had and asked himself, how can I use these tools that I have in the job that I am in? And he started performing.
It's interesting because we're really what we transitioned into without realizing is how do you use StrengthsFinders in sales, right? And, all of you guys watching and listening, basically anything you watch or listen, you're really subconsciously thinking, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? And here's one of the things I know, and it really struck me when I talked to Anna, and it's this, and I hear it in myself now too, Anna, and it's a confidence, and I heard it in the ISA, it's a confidence. So it's like, now I talk to people. I was talking to, Chris Suarez the other day, our co-founder at Place. And I go, look, Chris, this is what I know. I do 4 or 5 things really, really well, and you just don't want me on the rest. And this is what I do really well. And we were just talking about it. I'm like, I activate teams into goals. Like, we hit our goals. I build teams, whatever. And we were talking about it. And I think there is a confidence that comes with that when you know thyself,
1,000%.
and that if sales is nothing else, it's confidence.
Oh yeah. 1,000%. Well, and if I can share an example as well, I used to be a high school teacher in Baltimore. I said I would never do business or sales. So hello, here I am. Hello. And I love it, by the way. I absolutely love what I do. But I used to be in business meetings and real estate business meetings, and we would be discussing a problem. And no joke, I would be like, in my head, I'd be thinking, well, obviously we just need to do ABC. Fixed. And I would speak up, and my leader, who has a master's in economics with lots of business experience, he didn't always see my perspective, and I would shrink back because my dialogue in my head was, well, I'm a teacher. I never studied business. I'm probably wrong. He probably is right. Mm-hmm. But once I did StrengthsFinder, my number 1 is strategic. Strategic is very fast moving, and it just connects the dots incredibly quickly. And it is that language of, obviously, we just need to do ABC. So once I understood that, I explained that to my leader. And I said, sometimes my ideas might seem like I'm shooting from the hip because they come so fast. But in reality, I've thought it through just quickly. That's how strategic works. And I am going to be inclined to see the way forward before other people do, because my number one is strategic. And that totally changed the way I showed up in meetings. I would stand up a little bit taller of like, no, this really is a good idea. And here's why. And same thing in sales, talking to someone, well, here's what we need to do to get you moving forward. Not bashful about it like I used to be.
Yeah, really, really well said. I mean, I think that, again, I think that honestly, you guys, like, even if you don't know any of these strengths we're talking about, which that's not what this is designed for today. We're not going to teach you all the 34 strengths and, and whatever, but understanding that this just helps you know who you are. I would argue, I'll have someone come on for Enneagram. I'll have someone come on for, there's a lot of them that we can use. I think I like StrengthsFinders because of it's very practical. It has very practical, tactical uses to me. And it's easy to understand. It's words, not numbers. But whatever it is, I have a lot of people who get a lot out of Enneagram too. Whatever it is, if it gives you confidence and it helps to give you clarity in who you are and who you're not, and it helps you with a level of self-acceptance that you may not get on your own, it's worth it. I really think it's great. I mean, it's good stuff.
I totally agree. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. So let's slide into, and I think that we accidentally sort of talked about like, how do you use StrengthsFinders in sales? Because it's just such a natural conversation.
Right.
Because it's so helpful in sales. I do want to talk about how to use it in leadership. We have a lot of team leaders that listen, and a lot of executive corporate leaders listening. And so I want to spend some time on this. In my mind, this is where we're going to disagree. In my mind, when I think of leadership, I think, okay, like recruiting, motivation, retention. Yeah. And when I said that to you, you push back a little bit. You're like, well, we're not really supposed to use it in recruiting. And I do.
Yeah. I will say this. I think there's a right way to use it in recruiting. And so everyone listening might be wondering, why wouldn't we use it in recruiting? So let me explain. Gallup actually studied Fortune 500 companies, and they looked at their CEOs. And they were, because they're the researchers, like any human study you see, a lot of times it will come from Gallup, who StrengthsFinder is housed under. Yeah. And so they studied top CEOs looking for, do they all have activator? Do they all have achiever? Like, what's the common strength? And what they found is there was absolutely no common strength among them, except for the fact that they all operated through their strengths. So what I mean by that, Vija, is let's say you talked about Woo and Relator earlier. Woo tends to do really well in a large setting because it loves to win others over. That's what Woo stands for. I describe it like a social awareness to know, are people tracking with me or are they not? Do they like me? Do they not? So it does really well in front of a crowd. Relator also likes people, but it prefers the one-on-one. So let's say you have a manager, and you have a manager with Woo, they might distribute a message in a large team meeting. Whereas you might have a leader who has high Relator, and they might say, I'm going to take this crowd of 50 people and divide it into 5 groups of 10. And I'm going to meet with the 5 leaders because I like the deep one-on-one relationship. And then I'm going to let each of those 5 leaders distribute to their group of 10. So they're both getting leadership done, but they're doing it through the lens of their strengths, if that makes sense. So that's why Gallup says, don't use it to say, well, this person can't do this role because they don't have whatever strength, but you can use it in recruiting to know what gives this person energy, what drains their energy, how do I lead them well once they're on the team?
Okay. So push back a little bit, because that's what I do.
I like it. Bring it.
So here's my comment. So let's use team leader as an example. I'm transitioning out of it, but I've been the president of Ben Kinney brokerages, which means we've had 11 offices, and we'll have a team leader, which is like a branch manager running an office, and then an assistant one oftentimes. And I have some amazing ones, and I have also kissed some frogs on that one too, right? So for all the amazing ones I have learned through some mistakes on that. And the reason I say I now use it for recruiting is I started going, okay, what are the traits? What are the strengths? Because I've had my whole team take this. What are the strengths, the commonalities I see? So what I hear you saying is it's not if you're successful, it's how. I get that. What I would push back on is in that role, it's a recruiting and a leadership and kind of a morale role, right? So what I would argue is, and you'd have to pick one because I don't know strengths well enough like you do, they're not going to be, if you're an engineer type, you're not going to probably be good at that role. So like where I push back on is like, you don't have to have woo. I get it. You don't have to have relator. I get it. But you better have some kind of influencing or relationship building or something.
Yeah.
Because if it's all analytical stuff, like in your top 5 or 10, you're probably not a fit, right?
Yeah. Well, and to your point, Vija, they probably wouldn't enjoy the role ultimately. So I think the question is asking them in the interview process, how this is an influencing role. I see you have high analytical. How would you use your analytical to help influence people? And that would be the way to approach it. And truthfully, if someone has no of certain strengths, they might self-select out of the process. But then I go back to the ISA who had no relationship, nothing in his top 10, and he became a great ISA and he liked what he did, So I think I'll use myself.
Did he have influence in there?
No people, anything.
Wow.
Straight up like learner input.
Fascinating.
But he loved so input is more of a strategic thinking strength. And so he got a lot of energy out of inputting information to people about the real estate industry. So his energy was coming from the teaching of the knowledge, which helped him become personable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So I'm not saying strengths don't play a factor. What we don't want, though, is someone to look at like, oh, they have no relationship, no influencing, they would never work in this position. And you actually could miss a superstar because we're not asking questions. So it's asking the questions. I have my lowest strengths are discipline, focus, and consistency. And people tell me all the time.
Well, those have got to be my lowest. They've got to be bottom 5 for me. All of those.
And when I saw that, I was like, I'm screwed. I'm never going to get anything done. But a friend told me the other day, he's like, you seem so focused. And I was like, I'm really not. It just comes across that way. My top strengths are relationship, influencing, all that stuff. And I'm very passionate about changing people's lives. And so I come across focused when I'm doing things that change people's lives. But if I need to do something that is like analytical or a spreadsheet or something, you'll realize real quick, I'm not focused because that would show up everywhere.
Yeah.
I look focused because I'm doing relationships. Yeah. That's what I'm focused about. So I hope that explains in a way that makes sense to people that might be new to this. So here's the big takeaway, I would say. You could totally use it when you're hiring people. You just don't want to use it as a filter. You want to use it as a conversation piece to act like, hey, I see you have this strength. Tell me how that works for you. If you were in this position, how would you use it?
Like any assessment, you want to use it. It's really for how they're going to show up. What I tell everybody is when you hire somebody, and we have quite an extensive process, we are very slow to hire, right? And I mean, it's a lot of, interviews and assessments, whatever. And really it's not to find the perfect person. It's to just know, this is where I know I've succeeded or failed. I haven't necessarily failed if it doesn't work out. I've failed if they show up in a way that surprises me. So if I haven't covered up how they're going to show up and what they're going to need coaching on, where they're going to be strong and weak, that's where I'm in the fail. Sometimes people just interview really well and you're not always going to make the right hire. Right. But I also think that, I have started matching them, to your point. I've started matching them with different partners in the group. Like, okay, you've got woo, these are the traits you have. You should go shadow Alicia. And, I'm guessing your style is going to be a little bit more like Lena. So why don't you go spend a day with her? So I've definitely used it in launching, for productivity launching and kind of getting everyone on board, Yeah,
I think it's a great way to use it. And I love what you said a minute ago. And if you can remember, say it again, because I think it was a write down quote. but you said something like, it's not a failure if it doesn't work out. You know, I failed at the process if I'm surprised how they show up. Did I say that?
I think when you're hiring somebody and you're bringing them through the process, you're certainly trying to understand if they're going to work in the role and succeed in the role. For sure you are. But you're not looking for the perfect person. You're looking for how they're going to show up. So I haven't necessarily failed if someone leaves me. It feels like it, but I probably haven't. Where I failed is if they show up in a way that surprises me, that I didn't uncover in the interview process. And that happens. What I was saying is that some people are really good interviewers. They have good references for whatever. I mean, it's life. Like it's an imperfect thing. And, I judge myself on surprises though, more than I judge myself on actual success.
That's great. I feel like that's my takeaway from today's talk. That's really good, Vija. Yeah.
If I lose somebody and it was exactly what I thought, if I lose them, it's going to be because of X, and it's because of X, it's more like, okay, the risk didn't work. Like the gamble didn't work.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, it just speaks to the responsibility of truly understanding the people we're getting into business with. Yeah. To give an example of that for those listening, thinking like, how do I use this in my business? Let's say that you choose to use the tool StrengthsFinder as you're bringing people in, or even the team you already have. I recommend everybody take it. And at the end, I'll tell you what reports to look at. So help me remember that, Vija. Yeah. But let's say someone has high deliberative and I'm leading them. Deliberative is what it sounds like. They like to deliberate, take their time, really think it through. So say that you're deliberative, which you're not, but let's say you are, Vija. No. I might know for Vija, I need to go to her high deliberative, pretend, and say, hey, Vija, Friday, today's Wednesday. Friday, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to be discussing this change that we're making. And I'm going to ask for feedback. I wanted to tell you now so you have time to deliberate and think about it. So you have some good input when we get to Friday. Whereas other team members, I might not need to do that with because they don't have deliberative. But I know that's going to help her show up the best because that's her wiring. So as a leader, I need to give her what she needs. I also learned I have high ideation, which is part of why I create businesses. And one day my assistant was super stressed out. She's like, you're giving me so many things to do. And I was like, what have I given you to do? Like, I haven't given you anything to do today yet. And she showed me her list. And I learned I had to start telling her I'm ideating right now. Like I'm just spitting ideas. These are not to-dos. And it changed the way we work together in our meetings because it gave me freedom to be creative. And it freed her from realizing Anna's just thinking out loud. She's not actually giving me a to-do list. And never in my head was I giving her a to-do list, but the way she was wired.
I get that. I totally get, I've been like that before. You're like, oh, I'm just throwing it all. Okay.
Yeah. So it helps when you can explain to people, this is how I'm wired. So I'm going to show up like this. And then knowing how they're wired, it helps marriages, it helps everything.
Well, let's kind of move into that. So, we talked about kind of, recruiting. Now let's kind of move into, I don't know, motivation and retention are sort of similar, but let's move into retention. Let's move into retention because you just kind of talked about it. I would sort of argue that simply taking the time to understand your team and your people and, spending time talking to them about how they're showing up and working with them on that right there is retention because hardly any leaders do that.
Right. I completely agree. So if I can bring up a different assessment that Gallup has created real quick, and we're not going to go deep into it. It's just a quick little snippet. Yeah. But they have a tool called the Q12. And the foundation of this Vija was retention. And they admitted we set out on a journey knowing we might not find an answer, but we wanted to try. Okay. And they studied companies that have high retention and looked for what are the themes. And they looked at people that don't have great retention. What are the themes there? And they actually did come up with 12 things that must be in place for retention. And there's a whole book about it called First, Break All the Rules. If you want to go check it out, that whole book's about this. But of the 12 questions, let me just read a few off because this is going to speak to the managers listening right now. Number 1, I know it's expected of me at work. Number 3, At work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. Well, if I don't know what my strengths are, am I aware of where I'm at my best? Right. So that's how strengths would play into that. So at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. Listen to number 4. In the last 7 days, I have received, last 7 days, super specific, I have received recognition or praise for doing good work. Number 5, I'm like getting super passionate right now. Number 5, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. Number 6, there is someone at work who encourages my development. And number 7, at work, my opinions seem to count. Like, listen to how many of those are really centered around the hallmark stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
someone cares about me. Someone has praised me. Someone cares about my development. I get to do what I do best every day. So strengths definitely can help unlock those things and to help you even know how to praise the people that you're leading.
You know, it's interesting because I was just really focused on that. And would you share those?
Yeah. You mean on screen or?
Either on the screen or in chat or something? That'd be cool.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it, like, you don't get praised at work. So as a leader, because I lead leaders. As a leader, I don't praise people unless they're doing a good job. And if they're doing a good job, they're having wins at work. So it's like, it does, none of those exist in a silo, right? I mean, if they're doing a good job at work, they're in their strength zone, so you keep reverse engineering that back, and it makes perfect sense, which is why I kind of go back to recruiting and hiring. To me, they do go hand in hand. Like, you should use this for that. I think that there is a time where you might use StrengthsFinders and say, look, I have got 3 roles, and I think this other one over here might be a better role for you. Like, I see no problem doing that, because you can see where they're going to show up every day, where they want to show up every day.
Yeah. And I think just asking them, and I think here's a cool example of why it's important to just ask people, how would you use this strength in this position, and not automatically assume they wouldn't fit there. But there was a guy who has high individualization, which is 1,000% relationship, huge on relationship. Individualization loves to get to know individuals is the gist of it. Mm-hmm. And he was an airplane mechanic that worked by himself all day. So my brain immediately went to, oh man, he must hate his job. He's by himself all day. And so someone asked him, how do you, instead of saying, oh, you probably don't like that because you have high individualization, they said, how do you use your individualization as an airplane mechanic? Mm-hmm. And without missing a beat, he said, when my ladder is on the nose of the plane and I'm working on the front of the plane and I look in the windshield, I am visualizing the families, the sports teams, the pilots, and like who they care about, who loves them. And I just want to get them home safely. Mm. He didn't even miss a beat. So in my head, he must not like his job. And he actually described how he uses his individualization while he's by himself all day. He's using that strength.
It's interesting. And, side note, people want to be involved in something bigger than themselves. And if they can attach a spiritual vision or meaning to what they're doing every day, then you talk about retention, happiness, they're more fulfilled in life. Right. And so that answer is really amazing, because that's really what he did. He was like, I'm going to attach a much more universal and, I think fulfilling mission that I have in my life to my profession. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think to the leaders listening, and honestly, everyone, we all lead somebody. I mean, if you're a parent, ask your kids this when you come home, ask your spouse this when they come home from work today. Yeah. Even if they don't know their strengths or you don't know your strengths, when somebody comes home and they obviously had a good day, ask them, what about today made it so good? What put that smile on your face about what happened today? And as they start to describe, oh man, I got to talk to so-and-so and so-and-so, we had this deep, meaningful conversation. Mm-hmm. That's going to give you a clue into how they're wired. Now for you, Vija, because we know your strengths, I would say, oh, that's that relator speaking up. But you don't have to know the strengths to be able to identify. Now, if someone comes home and they're like, oh, work was so draining today. And you say, what about today drained your energy? Which I don't love to stay there, but it's helpful to identify that stuff. And if they said, I was by myself all day, I didn't really interact with anyone, well, that's a clue. That's a clue to strengths. And so those types of questions, what gave you energy today?
Mm-hmm.
What about that excited you? What about that discouraged you? How can we make that better next time? Those will all give you clues into the people you're leading.
I mean, the other thing is we haven't really talked about it is the categories that the strengths are in, and you've kind of touched on it. Do you want to kind of just briefly like list them, like, you know, influencer, whatever all those are?
Yeah, and I will go over them, and I'll also say if you don't have one of these categories, it doesn't mean you can't influence. For example, if you don't have any influencing, it doesn't mean you can't influence.
I mean, my top 5 are all influencing. Like, so I mean,
makes total sense.
Yeah, hopefully I can do a little bit of that.
Yeah. So there's 4 main categories. And no, for those of you that know the DISC assessment, it does not correlate with DISC. I get that question all the time. So we have influencing strengths. Those are actually the least common. So via the fact that you have so many, really, like, you are uniquely created to influence. And so
I think we're all uniquely created though, right?
Yes. And not everyone will do it the way you're doing it, where you're out in front of so many people.
Yeah, that
right?
makes sense.
So how you influence will differ. So you really are wired to be an influencer. So there's influencing. Then we have executing, which is the get stuff done category. Then we have relationship building, which is all about people, just like it sounds. And then we have strategic thinking, which is where like the analytical, the strategic, the input, the learner, all of those live. And when I got certified, I was so blessed. We had a DISC certified instructor in my class. So we got into this healthy discussion around those 4 categories I just gave you. And ooh, do they line up with strengths or DISC? And she quickly said, no, strengths is all about what motivates someone inside. And you actually can't tell by looking at someone. You have to ask questions. And that's something important I really want people to hear. You cannot assume, oh, they're showing up this way, they surely must have the whatever strength. Even my instructor from Gallup said, you can't tell, you have to ask questions. Whereas DISC is designed in like sales, things like that, to quickly assess, are they fast, slow, people, task-oriented? So they're 2 totally different tools.
Well, I love DISC as the language of sales. I do not love it for anything else beyond that. Like, to me, it's great. You have a DISC, presentation, the way you talk and show up. But this is, I agree with that. It's interesting though, because I think, we talk about the 4 categories with StrengthsFinder, and I remember I resisted, I got a little like, hey, no, I execute. I am an executor. My top 5 strengths, how can they all be influencing? This isn't right. Like, there's got to be an executor in there. And you just looked at me and you go, well, you execute through influence.
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah. Okay. It doesn't mean you don't execute. So kind of going back to the beginning of this, like it's just, it's how, it's not if you're going to be successful, it's just how. Right. And it's going to look different from everybody. Not one person, I don't think, in the universe could have the same 34, be like mathematical impossible.
No. In fact, let me give an analogy, because this might help describe this really well. I'm about to put a shed in my backyard. So this is the analogy I'll use because it's on my mind. But let's say we all were going to build a shed today, and there's 50 people here, and all 50 people got a toolbox. And we had this little game that we all are going to build a shed by the end of today, but you can only use the top 10, the 10 tools in your toolbox. You have to use those tools. We would all get it done, but we might do it a little bit differently because we have 10 different tools. You have different tools in your toolbox. I have different tools.
I would hire someone. That's how I would do it differently.
That's a great idea. I
would influence someone to come work for me.
That's hilarious. But the point is, at the end of the day, we would all have the job done. How we did it will just be different, right? And that's an analogy I just came up off the top of my head. Probably not the perfect analogy, but it's
a great one. It's a great one.
Yeah, that's ideation and strategic.
Some people would read the directions, women. No, I'm kidding.
I would not.
I'm just kidding. Kidding. I'll get the emails,
Yeah.
Every time no. Don't email me. I love men and women.
Just joking.
Just a little joke. All right. Well, super, super helpful. So I want to kind of wrap this up with the takeaway, like so once again, it's gallup.com, GALLUP.
Yes. Gallup.com. and you'll go to products, and then under products, you'll click on assessments, and you'll see it sitting right there. You can either unlock your top 5 or unlock all 34, whichever one you want to unlock. And here's the important thing I want to say. After you do it, you'll be taken to a dashboard with all these different reports. And there's really just one report that I want you to pay close attention to. And I'm going to share a screen real quick, Via, to show everybody. Strengths Insight Guide. This is the one that you want to take. And if you've zoned out for a minute because you're on the Gallup site, come back real quick and watch. The Strengths Insight Guide, this is the one you want to watch or to read. And here's what's amazing, Via. Everybody, please hear this. I thought everyone with Woo had the same paragraph. I thought everyone with Activator had the same paragraph. In the Strengths Insight Guide, it is customized to you based off all the answers you gave on the assessment. So for example, I was coaching someone 2 weeks ago and we both have high Woo. I had him read his Woo paragraph and then I read mine. They weren't even remotely the same. And the reason I would explain that, Via, is let's say that we're making a stir fry and we have 10 ingredients and we have 9 of the same, but our 10th ingredient is the spice, and you pick teriyaki and I pick ginger. Well, once we put that in there, all of the ingredients are flavored by that 10th ingredient. So even though we both have a stir fry, they're going to taste totally different. And I can't say, can you scrape off all the teriyaki from your broccoli? Like, let's totally remove it. Let's erase and redo. You can't. Like, it's baked in there. And so when you do the assessment, there's 177 questions. Think of that like 177 different ingredients. And so that's why you have to ask people, how does your relator show up for you? How does your strategic show up for you? Because they're not going to show up the same way. They're going to be different depending on what strengths are around it. So that, let me put it back up one more time. Once you take the assessment, check this out, Strengths Insight Guide. Here's what's amazing. There's only check this out, 1 in 93 million chance that someone else will have your exact report. So when you read this, it really is you. And I'll say this, Via, I've been coaching this now since 5 years. Whoa, it's crazy. I have yet to have someone come back and say that thing I disagreed with in my report. They always come back and say, I totally get it now. So a lot of times people will read it and they'll say, this is so weird. How does it know? And sometimes you'll have someone say, I'm not sure about this sentence. And I'll say, go talk to your spouse, go talk to your friends, go talk to people that know you and ask them about that sentence you don't agree with. And Via, it's very rare to say always. And I will tell you, always they come back and say, I totally see it. I just didn't see it before. So that report is you on paper. It's pretty powerful.
Well, and I don't know how you feel about this. I didn't clear this with you, but I do want to just say to everybody, 1 hour with Anna, once you've taken, if you'd want to invest a little bit of time and money in this, taking the 34 strengths and unlocking them and spending an hour with Anna or however long it was, Anna, our one-on-one session was one of the most beneficial coaching sessions I've ever had in my life. And I have been blessed incredible coaches. So it really reframeworked how I do a lot of things, and I continue to learn new things, every day. I've taken the KPA, the AVA, the DISC. I can't even think. I've taken probably 6 or 7 of these, and they're all good. I don't necessarily say do this and not do the others, but this one has had the most tangible impact for me so far out of all of them. And again, that's not me saying, throw out the rest, because I think there's benefit, to all of them, like we talked about with the disc, but I really, really like it. Well, our time is up. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here. How can people, really important for me to make sure you can tell them how they reach you? How do they get a hold of you?
Thank you. And thank you for that, Via. I really appreciate it. It's my passion to help people be their best. It's like a joy and a delight to be able to have a front row seat to that. So thank you for that. The best way to reach me would be my email. It's strengthscoachanna, ANNA, @gmail.com. So strengths, just like it sounds, coach Anna at gmail.com, and that'll come right to me.
That in chat. Yeah. So, okay. All right. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And hopefully this got you guys interested enough to just go take the test. You know, you don't have to take all 34 if you want to just kind of get a feel for it. But if you like it, you know, connect with Anna and have your team take it. It's really fun to kind of dive in and learn it together. I think I have a friend who's kind of into it, and she kind of got me into it as well. So thank you, Anna. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Yay.
Bye.
Thanks for being here, guys. Bye.